About halfway through this chapter, and of course the beginning of a new volume, we come out of the flashback, and the ending is what really did it for me. Just kind of perked me up a little bit, made me smile.
One Piece, chapter 358, Reactivation.
Whew. Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome, flashback-heavy, story-driven, character-driven as well tale of One Piece. Our last chapter, of course, saw us really, looking like we were about to come out of the flashback over here and finishing up Volume 37. Here we are jumping headfirst into Volume 38, and it looks here like we've got Luffy, pretty pissed off looking on there. Don't know who that character is. That looks like Kokoro, and I have no idea what's going on with these fellas over here. But the chapter did wind up leaving us hanging, so to speak, in the sense that as Tom was being, carted off and taken away, Frankie went ballistic and obviously it attacked everybody and then wound up getting away. But really the end of the chapter and the end of the volume was Frankie waiting out there with like this rocket launcher on the sea train tracks and trying to actually take down the sea train, in the hopes to rescue Mr. Tom, as well as take out the I'm assuming the CP5 agents that spanned him and whatnot, who he had already pretty handily messed up, and we wind up seeing in this chapter just how bad he messed him up. So very, very cool stuff. And then so that's where the chapter left off in the volume. That's where this one picks up, and it actually picks up. It's 4 years later. It's 4 years later. Everybody has presumed Frankie to be dead. They do wind up showing us. They show us that he winds up coming upon this like wreck, this wrecked ship that he winds up scrap iron basically that's still floating that he pulls himself up onto, and we presume this is how he became a cyborg. He was obviously a very talented, very gifted engineer with the battleships and things like that he built, and pretty much from getting hit by this fucking train, that messed him up physically, I'm sure, as well as mentally, but nonetheless, though, he uses, obviously, scrap and things like that to go and fix himself up because he says that his body is pretty much done for. So that's, we can kind of get that little part taken care of over there. It gives us some insight into, how he became this cyborg, at least for me anyway, it does. But then we kind of go to the whole, 4 years later, and this is when everybody has presumed him, including Iceberg, to be dead. And Iceberg went and he made a vow after everything happened that he was going to unite the city. He was going to make it better. He was going to make it a better place to live. And that's how he eventually rose up through the ranks, being very popular amongst the people, uniting all these warring companies that were always, kind of cutthroat and against each other, these shipbuilding companies, into one company, and really making Water 7 thrive, being elected as mayor and everything else. And so what winds up happening is when the CP9 agents were talking in Iceberg's bedroom and trying to piece everything together, and they talked about how they'd been there 5 years, but 4 years ago, somebody given the name of Cuddy Flam wound up going into the offices. And keep in mind too that Iceberg, and this is something I haven't mentioned, Iceberg's actually the one that kind of gave Frankie his name too, so it's not something that went unnoticed. I just didn't mention it. But nonetheless, though, so he gives that name, and we wind up seeing that kind of that scene that was only talked about played out, how it actually worked out. And he goes and he winds up, first Iceberg goes and actually turns him away, says, no, throw him out of here and this and that. They wind up meeting up with each other, though, and sitting there and talking a little bit. And Iceberg is obviously pissed. He still has not forgiven, Frankie. But the bottom line is that he really is happy to see him. And this is the exchange of the blueprints. He winds up giving the blueprints to Frankie, explains to him, obviously, how important they are. And Frankie's like, how can you trust me to just not go? You trust me enough to not go and actually make this myself, or to, whatever. And he goes, and he's just like, what do you think the answer is to it? They may have not liked each other a lot, and they may have kind of had this almost like sibling rivalry, but I believe that there's still some love and mutual respect for one another, just because of their shared past and some of the trials and tribulations that they went through, and obviously also sharing, in their mentor. They're almost like their father-like figure that had took them in and took them under his wing, in Mr. Tom, the super huge fish man. So anyway, the flashback. So we wind up getting that. Everything gets fleshed out in the sense that we know that Frankie now has the plans. We know that he, and Iceberg tells him, you can't ever come here again. Just go by the name of Frankie. Everybody presumes that you died in that train incident, and by the sea train. and let's just leave it that way. You know, everybody thinks you're dead. Let's just leave it that way because he says it's only a matter of time before these government hounds wind up coming after me. You know, and obviously now, fast forward 4 years, we see what's happened with that, right? So we wind up we come out of the flashback over here, and it was kind of like this whole retelling in Frankie's mind of what happened. But really what it winds up being is the CP9 agents, they're like, you know what, that's fine. You don't want to tell us anything? We'll just take you to Annie's lobby, and we got all the time in the world. We can question you there and get more information out of you, because Frankie, of course, is still, mummings the word. He's not telling them anything about it. So they go and they dial up their director, their boss, on the snail phone, and the Den Mushi, and they go and they hand it to him, because the boss wants to talk to you right away, and it winds up being none other than than the brown-nosed sack of shit himself, Spandam. He's still alive. He's still pissed off. He's wearing this weird sort of it looks like this weird kind of almost like, what do they call that when they, like a dominatrix type thing, where they put on different leather type outfits and stuff like that. He looks kind of like, he reminds me of the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. If you don't know who the Gimp is, you've never seen Pulp Fiction, just Google the Gimp and Pulp Fiction, you'll see. But that's what he reminds me of. He's all messed up from his wounds, and he talks to Frankie about how not a day has gone by when I didn't think about trying to enact revenge for it, but I couldn't because the man that did this to me was presumed to be dead, but now we know you're not. And then the CP9 agents are like, over 100, government officials and naval officers were injured that day when, Frankie went batshit crazy, along obviously with Tom first, before they carted him off. And he still hasn't answered for those crimes. So they're basically like, we got you over a barrel anyway. It's a typical government or police officer or anybody with any type of power. It's a typical bullshit they try to do. They try to go and take whatever it is that you've done, and they try to exacerbate it and just make it like it's this huge thing, blow it out of proportion, and then make it out to where you owe them. Like, if you give them the information, we won't do what we can do to you because you broke the law. Anyway, so that's kind of where they go with that. For me, the high point of the chapter, though, that was really cool, and then they go, and as they're going to leave, Usopp is just like, hey, wait, guys, and then, Lucci turns around and goes, huh, kind of gives him a glare, right, and Usopp's like, oh, sorry, my apologies, and then Kaku winds up saying, hey, that's one of the Straw Hats, and then it's just left there, so I don't know if they actually take Usopp with them or what, but either way, Usopp shows that he still has no backbone, and that he's still obviously fighting his inner demons, because, he saw them come in there and mop the floor with Frankie, I did like, though, how several chapters ago, before going into the flashback, Frankie actually did grab Bluno by the face and actually had him for a split second. It looked like maybe an upper hand or an advantage, but nonetheless, though, is something I forgot to mention, and, sometimes I think of these things 4 or 5 chapters down the road. But the end of the chapter, and the most important part for me, was that it goes back to the mansion that's burning, that's on fire at the Galley-Lock Company. We know that obviously Chopper was buried under a pile of rubble. Zoro and Luffy had been thrown from the building, and Nami also wound up falling or getting thrown out, whatever. She's laying out there unconscious. But we know Iceberg and Paulie were tied up back to back with the flames, literally licking up on them, right? So we wind up seeing this cool scene where they're trying to battle the fire and put it out, and then all of a sudden, the shadow and this figure pops out the window, and it's freaking, it's Chopper. It's Chopper all hulked up in his big reindeer man form or whatever, and he's got them over his back, and he's got Zoro's sword, one of his swords, in his mouth, which I thought was cool too. Remember to grab that. So the chapter winds up ending up with him, obviously. Everybody, of course, being excited that Iceberg and Paulie are okay, but not knowing what's going on, of course, with Lucci and everybody else. They just presumed that if Lucci and company were in there, that they would save him. That's not what happened. But then, of course, Chopper winds up seeing Nami, and he's like, oh, man, I got to give her medical attention. And that's how everything winds up ending up. The chapter just leaves you hanging over there. So it was definitely very cool, though, to go and get this check-in with them, because the couple of chapters that took away from that, in a way, it was nice and refreshing because of everything that was happening. It was so many downers that were going on with the crew that you were like, all right, well, we got to see something that looks up over here. And then it kind of went into this flashback that ultimately was kind of a downer when you think about it, because in the flashbacks of One Piece, that's when people wind up dying, and a lot of terrible things usually happen that that make you upset, make you cry, make you tear up. So after all that, coming out of it, and then actually getting to see that Chopper wound up being able to at least get them out of there, and that Nami, although unconscious and wounded, is still alive. Chopper a little bit beaten up, but still alive. Now we just need to know where the hell Sanji has gone off to, and where Luffy and Zoro were thrown to. So that's how the chapter ends. And my chapter question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is: is ultimately, in the end, what were your thoughts on this flashback that Frankie had? Did you like the way that it was told? Do you like the content? Did you enjoy the backstory of Mr. Tom and obviously his connections to the Pirate King, those sort of things? Just let me know overall what your thoughts were on this flashback. I personally didn't think it was too long. I didn't think it was too short. I thought it was just right. It conveyed the message in the 5 or 6 chapters that it was, and it did a great job of doing so, but it wasn't so much to where I felt like it dragged on and I was just like, God, I want this to end. But it also wasn't too short and brief to where I felt like I got to know Tom and then some of those characters obviously in their past. So, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We'll look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
Usopp, he's so fine, he blow my mind. Hey, Usopp. Hey, remember to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even other channel.